Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers beat writer for The Athletic, and welcome to episode 21 of Buha's Block. Today we are going to be doing a Lakers mailbag, answering all of your questions, most of which came from X/Twitter, but I did get a YouTube question, and as a reminder, if you want me to answer your questions in my next mailbag, drop them in the comment section below or hit me up on X/Twitter when I post that I'm going to be doing a mailbag. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get into it. First question from @LAL Prime. Are the Lakers looking to use the 17th pick this year in a potential third star trade, or maybe use it to get a solid role player? Yes, the answer is yes. The Lakers are going to look to move that number 17 pick on draft night. It will be the first time that they could use all three of their tradable first round picks, and it's a prime opportunity for them to potentially get either a third star or to improve the roster by attaching one or two or three of those picks alongside players under contract to upgrade the starting lineup or the bench. But it's the first time they'll have more than one pick at their disposal. And my understanding is that they are going to be aggressive and they're going to be active and they're going to try and use that. With the first round exit, there's an acknowledgement that this roster can be improved upon. Now, whether that is a significant move, like a trade for, say, Trae Young or Donovan Mitchell or DeJounte Murray, or whether it's a smaller move, and again, bringing in a 3-and-D wing or another big man, something like that, that remains to be seen. But the Lakers are going to explore their options on draft night. And now, look, it doesn't mean they're going to do something, because that was the plan last year as well, doing some type of move on draft night with the number 17 pick. So now they have the number 17 pick again, and we'll see if they end up moving it. But my understanding is they're going to be active and aggressive. And on top of that, they have some incentive, because a few days later, LeBron James has his player option, and he has a decision to make whether he is going to opt in and potentially extend later in August, or if he's going to opt out and re-sign or go elsewhere. And LeBron's future will, I think, in part be determined by what the Lakers do around the draft and how aggressive they are and what upgrades they can make. So, and to be clear, from everything we've reported at The Athletic and everything I've heard, the Lakers are willing to give LeBron whatever type of contract he wants, and his intention is to stay and retire as a Laker. So I do think they are going to figure things out, and there will be a contract in some form, be it him opting in and extending later, or just him simply re-signing. But I think a part of that will be the coaching search and how that plays out, as well as what upgrades the Lakers can make to this roster to make this team be more competitive next season. So those are all things that the team is going to be weighing over the next 6 to 8 weeks, and they are going to have an important decision to make around the draft in terms of what upgrade they can make to the roster. So I expect them to likely do something. It's just a matter of degrees. Is it a smaller move where, again, they're acquiring maybe a better wing defender or a better big man to either start next to Anthony Davis or to back him up? Or are they swinging for the fences and acquiring a third star and really reshaping the roster? So a lot to monitor over the next few weeks. Donovan Mitchell and his situation with Cleveland, Trae Young switching from Clutch Sports to CAA theoretically decreases the odds that he ends up in LA. Does that increase the odds that DeJounte Murray maybe ends up in LA, or that maybe he's the one that ends up getting moved? So a lot to uncover over the next few weeks. Next question from @George Santiago. Do you have any insight on the Lakers process and timeline for this coaching search? Like, who will be involved / do candidates reach out to them? Or is it only the Lakers who reach out? Are they ready to enter draft day without a coach in place? Well, this is a good question, and this is a very topical question with the events of Thursday. So Charles Lee, who is one of the 5 candidates that we reported on at The Athletic, gets snatched up by the Charlotte Hornets. and ESPN reports that Mike Budenholzer is the front runner and is already thinking about his potential staff for the Phoenix job after Frank Vogel was fired. So those are 2 of the 5 names that we had reported at The Athletic. One of the other names, Ty Lue, is still under contract and potentially could be getting an extension from the LA Clippers. From what I've been told, Ty would be the Lakers' number 1 option if he were available, but that seems unlikely. He does have 1 year remaining with the Clippers, so even if nothing changes, he's technically still under contract, but it sounds like the Clippers are trying to figure out a contract extension for him. But until that happens, he's technically a theoretical possibility, so he remains in the mix in terms of being the Lakers' number 1 target, just still under contract. So it's like number 1 target, but not necessarily even available. And then JJ Redick remains a candidate. He was the number 2 choice for the Charlotte Hornets. And then there's Kenny Atkinson, who was in the mix for the Lakers in 2022 when they hired Darvin Ham and remains one of the top assistants in the NBA. I've also seen some other names floated out that I can confirm the Lakers have some interest in, with those being Micah Nori, David Adelman, Sean Sweeney, and Chris Quinn. To my knowledge, the Lakers are not at the stage of interviewing coaches yet, but that will be happening soon. It's a little tricky timing-wise because you have Adelman, Nori, and Sweeney all in playoff series right now. You have JJ Redick, who is on the top broadcast team at ESPN and is supposed to be calling the finals, which would be about a week or so before the draft. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Lakers end up doing their interviews and just the timing of it, and if they request certain guys while they're still in the playoffs, and how that process works with the teams, and especially with Nori and Minnesota, with Chris Finch having this knee injury and Nori essentially coaching the team with him. It feels like his voice and presence is even more important than ever, and I'm not sure how the Lakers are going to finagle getting an interview with him until the Timberwolves season's done, and that could go into mid-June, depending on what happens with this series with the Nuggets. From what I've been told, the Lakers' plan is to have a coach in place by the NBA draft, which is June 26th. And that makes sense, right? You want a coach in place by the time you are making a draft selection potentially, or if you are making a larger move, as we previously discussed, potentially trading for a 3rd star or trading for a role player or 2, a couple of rotational upgrades. You want a coach who is going to be present during those discussions and that planning and just that whole process. So the Lakers' plan is to have someone in place by then. That gives them about 6.5, 7 weeks or so to figure this out. And again, figure out the timeline with the candidate interviews and nailing it down to a few candidates and then a couple candidates. And during that process, one of the big factors is going to be what happens with Ty Lue. And because if he becomes available, he automatically becomes their top choice and they will pursue him hard. But can JJ Redick get away from his broadcasting schedule, and what happens with the assistants who are still in the playoffs and just the timing with all of that? And as you get deeper in the playoffs, it gets a little trickier. Now, look, Charles Lee was on the Celtics bench and he just got the job with the Hornets. So it is possible. And I would not be surprised if the Lakers made a hire before the finals conclude. And that could potentially mean interviewing some of these guys during the playoffs. I just think like that's the timeline that I've heard is about the next 6 to 7 weeks is the goal, to have a coach in place by the draft who will then be a part of the decision-making process in terms of either selecting someone or reshaping the roster with either a big move or a small to medium-sized move. Next question from @TheHoopsLoop. Are Nori and Adelman candidates for the next Lakers coaching job? So I just spoiled this answer with my answer to the previous question, but yes, I can confirm that those are 2 of the Lakers candidates during this coaching search. They're casting a wide net. They're trying to do their due diligence, and I think both guys are quality candidates. I think if they are going the assistant coaching route, those would probably be my top 2 choices, and it sounds like the Lakers, or at least some people with the Lakers, feel the same way. Now, again, there are a lot of moving parts with this already. They've lost a couple candidates, and there are still some coaches who could potentially become available depending on what happens with their teams in the playoffs. But right now it's looking like Atkinson and potentially Stotts are the only two with real head coaching experience. Everyone else is either an assistant coach or, in the case of JJ Redick, someone who has a lot of NBA experience with his 15 years in the league, but not someone who has actually coached at the NBA level as an assistant or as a head coach. It's a bit of a wild card, but obviously, as we know, he's got the relationship with LeBron. He's got the podcast. He's got the TV stuff, and he is very knowledgeable and appears to be on track to being a good coach one day. It's just a matter of, is that now with the Lakers, or is that more of a down the road thing? Next question at Nocturnal147. Hey, Jovan, YouTube subscriber here. Appreciate all the work you do. Thank you. What's the market for D'Lo this offseason? Any dark horse teams besides the Magic and Spurs who might have cap space and desire to sign him? What's Magic and Spurs level of interest in D'Lo? A good question. I have a list here of teams with projected cap space. This is as of February 2024. So the Detroit Pistons, don't see them as a fit with Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey, etc. Orlando Magic, I do see as a potential fit. Philadelphia 76ers, I do not see as a potential fit. I do not see a D'Lo Maxey backcourt making much sense given the defensive concerns with that pairing. Utah Jazz are the next one. I guess I could see it, although they have Keontae George, Jordan Clarkson, Colin Sexton. They could trade Sexton or Clarkson, obviously, and those guys have been in trade rumors over the past year or so. But I don't necessarily see D'Lo making a lot of sense. Toronto Raptors, I guess, are an interesting one. I mean, they've got Emmanuel Quickley, so maybe a Quickley D'Lo backcourt wouldn't really make sense. OKC, I don't see it there. Charlotte Hornets, they already got LaMelo, and then the San Antonio Spurs, which is another team that I've said would make some theoretical sense. Now, as to the interest level, the Spurs, trying to get intel on the Spurs is pretty difficult. So I don't have a great read on that situation. Now, they had interest in Austin Reeves last summer, so they've already tried to poach a Lakers backcourt free agent before, or at least had some interest in doing so. On paper, I don't see D'Lo as like a personality fit in San Antonio, though I think the culture has changed a bit. But I think if they can't get Trae Young and they can't get Darius Garland, a D'Lo, Victor Wembanyama pick and roll sounds pretty good to me, right? So I think they are a potential suitor there. Again, maybe Toronto is one where, although quickly D'Lo backcourt, I don't really love. Like Utah, the Keontae George is their guard of the future. Detroit doesn't make sense. So like it's really Orlando and San Antonio if you just look at the cap space teams. And Orlando, from my understanding, they are going to be pursuing potentially a Paul George, a Klay Thompson. So there are going to be a couple of guys that are ahead of D'Lo in the pecking order. And there's some mixed intel with Orlando in terms of them wanting to maintain flexibility and how long of a contract they'd want to give up, and the timeline with some of their younger guys. So I think D'Lo would fit the timeline. And maybe just spitballing here, it's something like a 2-year, $40 million, 2-year, $45 million deal for D'Lo with Orlando, where they maintain that longer term flexibility. He gets paid. He gets a pay raise off of the 18.7 that he's owed for next season. So I think there will be some interest in D'Lo, and Orlando has upwards of $69 million in cap space, depending on what they do. So they could theoretically sign D'Lo and Paul George, or D'Lo and Klay Thompson. So it's not out of the realm of possibility they sign a couple of guys. I think D'Lo will be in the mix more so for Orlando than San Antonio if he does end up going anywhere. As far as like league-wide interest, again, like the Lakers were trying to trade D'Lo leading into the 2024 trade deadline. That was arguably the peak of his value. He was playing some of the best basketball, if not the best basketball he's ever played. He was essentially an expiring contract or a potential free agent with that player option for the following season. And the Lakers were not able to garner much interest for him. And that could work in the Lakers' favor with D'Lo either opting in, and then the Lakers could trade him, or him potentially re-signing, and then the Lakers being able to trade him later in the season, be it December 15th or January 15th, depending on the contract that he resigns for. Next question from @YoBlank. Congrats on 10K subs, fam. Thank you, Blank. I appreciate it. Who is your prediction for the next Lakers head coach? Well, This is the multi-million-dollar question. This is the 8-figure question. If I had to make a selection right now, and this is a guess, this is pure speculation. Please do not aggregate me. Please do not say I am saying this person is going to be the next Lakers coach, even though I have a feeling this still might get aggregated and it still might look like I'm saying that this person is going to be the next Lakers coach. But if I had to guess right now who I think will be the next Lakers coach, I think it's going to be JJ Redick. I think there are a lot of breadcrumbs there. I had initially heard Mike Budenholzer was among the front runners for this job. But obviously, he's been speaking with Phoenix, and it looks like that's a done deal that they didn't want to announce was a done deal right after firing Frank Vogel. That's a little shady. So it seems like they're going to drag that out a little bit, but it seems like it's a done deal between Budenholzer and the Suns. Charles Lee was another name we had reported on, and he just got swooped up. And then Ty Lue's a name we reported on and others have reported on, but he's not even available. So by process of elimination, we're really down to JJ Redick and Kenny Atkinson among the realistic candidates that The Athletic has reported on. And again, there's been some of these assistants that I've heard, and they've been getting some buzz. But looking at Kenny Atkinson as the most experienced coach and JJ Redick as a coach who many around the league believe has a bright future. The coach I have often compared JJ to during this process has been Steve Kerr. I see a lot of similarities between JJ and Steve Kerr. And it's not just because they're both white shooters. I think there's more to it. I think there's the temperament. Both guys are witty, charming, and smart and have chill, laid-back personalities, but they also have this fiery, competitive side where that allows Kerr to command a locker room and get guys to buy in because he'll have his tantrums on the sideline, his ejections, his technicals. He'll lay into guys when he really needs to, but he's so selective with it that when he does it, it carries weight. I think that's how JJ would be. He's talked about getting thrown out at his 10-year-old's games, and you see that fiery side to him. As he says on his podcast, he's got some shit to him, right? And that's something that I think would bode well with holding LeBron and AD accountable. I think he would hold the locker room accountable. I think he would have a no-nonsense approach. He's got the obsession and the competitive side to the game. I think from an X's and O's and strategy standpoint, he obviously knows what he's talking about, and he covers the game and analyzes the game at a high level. I think you've seen on the Mind the Game podcast with LeBron that they see eye to eye on a lot of things. I think the timing of all that was very interesting with them starting the podcast when they did. So I think given the ties to LeBron and given that he is one of the more promising coaching candidates, I think JJ is a real candidate. And if I had to pick right now, I would lean toward JJ. I think there's been some seeds planted and some breadcrumbs there with that. Now there are some factors of, again, like he's supposed to be doing the finals with Mike Breen and Doris Burke, and how would that work? Like, would ESPN let him out of his contract, or would he have to continue calling games through the finals? Then now he's joining the Lakers like a week or so right before the NBA draft and getting up to speed during that time. Like, is that enough of a runway before that, or is he communicating during that process? Like, there are some X factors, and I know people are going to mention David Adelman and Micah Nori, and I think both of those guys are legitimate candidates, and both of those guys will get some consideration here. I just think in terms of commanding the locker room and getting buy-in from LeBron and AD, that might be a challenge for those guys. And I don't know enough about them. And I think the interview process is ultimately going to filter out certain candidates, and the Lakers will make their decision based on that and the intel that they get and them just doing their due diligence. But if I had to make a choice right now, I think JJ Redick would be the favorite among the field. Now that could change, and that assumes JJ is even interested in coaching the Lakers and that LeBron would co-sign it, right? So that there's some assumptions going on here, but I know he's a legitimate candidate. I know he's someone that the Lakers have interest in. And if I had to pick among the current field, now that Bud is off the table, I believe that JJ is the most likely among this group. And that would be my choice, barring Ty Lue out of the blue becoming available, at which point I think Ty Lue would then be my choice. But among the current candidates that are realistic and available, I would say JJ. Next question from @ArmonBallin_. Can Jarrett Allen be acquired for picks plus salary filler? Yes, he can be. There are several ways for the Lakers to execute this trade. The base of it would likely have to be Rui Hachimura, though there are ways to make it work with a Jared Vanderbilt or a Gabe Vincent. And you could do something like Rui plus JHS and a pick or 2 picks, however much it would take to get that done. Jarrett Allen is someone I think would be a great fit, a much better version of JaVale McGee. Not quite the same size, but obviously is an elite screener and roller, a really good rim protector, a good rebounder, and I think would be a nice complement to Anthony Davis. So if the Lakers could, if you could do that and upgrade the front court that way, and now you have Jarrett Allen, Anthony Davis, LeBron James, the spacing would be a little clunky, and I think bringing in a more traditional center does put some pressure on AD to space the floor, at least to the elbows, the mid-range area, if not the 3-point line. But the Cavs have figured it out somewhat, right? Kind of. I mean, they're in the second round. They just whooped Boston. So I like Jarrett Allen. I think, that's interesting. It's just why would Cleveland do that, right? So, I mean, maybe that's why I look at Rui or Vando as the centerpiece, as maybe Cleveland could talk themselves into, if we're getting a couple picks from the Lakers, we're getting JHS, a second-year player with some promise theoretically, and getting Rui or Vando to bolster our front court and make a little bit more sense. Maybe next, slide Evan Mobley up to center, and now you have either a small ball 4 in Rui, a guy who can punish mismatches, or Vando, just an elite wing defender, though comes with some shooting concerns. So that would maybe be it. Otherwise from Cleveland side, I think it's a bit of a stretch. I don't know if they want to just give up Jarrett Allen, and if they do, and they create a bidding war, I think the price would get higher than what the Lakers could probably offer, unless they're willing to give up all 3 picks, which I don't think would quite make enough sense. I think you only do that for a clear all-star number 3 option, not for a really good starting center, but not, I mean, if we're ranking starting centers, Jarrett Allen's not in the top 5. It's probably not in the top 7 or 8. It's probably a borderline top 10 center. So it might be too steep of a price. And again, I don't see, I know Cleveland will probably have to go in a different direction with Allen and Mobley in terms of splitting them up, but they could probably get more for Allen. But from the Lakers' perspective, I'm looking at this from the Lakers' perspective. Yes, there are ways to make it work with the current guys under salary, and I could see why the Lakers would be interested in that. I just don't know if Rui plus JHS plus a pick and maybe a protected pick, I don't know if that moves the needle enough for Cleveland, unless they're just really high on Rui and like the way he fits next to the other pieces. Next question @Ronnie Charrier. A year later, there's been lots of perfect hindsight on who the Lakers should have drafted, but just looking at Hood-Schifino's development instead of comparing him to who else could have been drafted, what are your thoughts on this year and him going forward? I like how you frame this question and looking at the positives or the promise with JHS rather than just shitting on him, which has become the popular go-to with the fan base. And I get it. I think JHS had a really disappointing rookie season. And I know you said not to compare him to the guys who went directly after him, but it's hard not to when you see the next 3 picks are Brandon Pajemski, Jaime Jaquez, and Cam Whitmore. And those guys becoming, pods, and Jaquez were starters at various points and key bench guys for their teams. And Cam Whitmore was a key bench guy for Houston when healthy. And to compare that to JHS, who was merely a garbage time player for the Lakers. He played in 21 games, averaged 5 minutes a game. His shooting splits were 22, 13, and 60. To be honest, there was not much to be optimistic about with JHS in terms of his NBA minutes. I thought he was rather unimpressive and did not flash much NBA skill on either end. He looked like a considerable project who is at least a year away, if not a couple, from being an NBA level rotation guy. Like the shot looks broken. The separation in terms of getting downhill and creating separation from guys, the pick and roll stuff, the playmaking, and even the defense, I thought were all subpar to the way the Lakers hyped this guy up, and some of the stuff we saw in summer league, and just like he was clearly not ready and not at the level that I think the Lakers were hoping he would be at. Now, G League Jalen Hood-Schifino, say that a few times fast, looked like a rotation player against G League competition, of course. And I have the stats here, but in 15 games, 22 points per game, 5 rebounds, 5.5 assists, just under a steal, and 47, 43, 80 shooting splits. So again, as I said, his shooting splits in the NBA were 22, 13, 60. Those basically over doubled in field goal percentage to 47. Basically tripled in 3-point percentage from 13% to 43, and went up 20% in free throws from 60 to 80. So of course, very small sample size, 21 games, 5 minutes a game. So just off the top of my head, he played around 105 minutes in the NBA. But again, he looked rather unimpressive. You didn't see the flashes of like, oh, this is why the guy, these are some NBA skills he has. Like I thought for the most part, I think he had a performance against Detroit where he scored like 10 points. But for the most part, I was not impressed. He did not help the Lakers in any meaningful way. And I think that is like one of the few concerns, is just like didn't look great and didn't even have like a moment or a flash of like the one random game where he plays 18 minutes and gives the Lakers something off the bench. For the Lakers, it's really just going off his G League stuff. But the problem is there are plenty of guys in the G League vets who just look great in the G League, and it just never translates to the NBA level. So that's the question with JHS moving forward, is how can you get the freedom that he plays with, the confidence that he plays with in the G League, and translate that to the NBA level? And the one thing in reviewing the film on him in the G League was he was playing a lot of point guard, and he was playing a lot with the ball in his hands. And my concern is I just don't see scenarios in which the Lakers are going to be funneling the ball or running the ball rather through JHS when you have LeBron, AD, Austin Reeves, potentially D'Lo, potentially Rui Hachimura, and maybe you're going out and adding another bench guy. I mean, even a guy like Gabe Vincent is going to be ahead of him in the pecking order. Spencer Dinwiddie, if they retain him. Christian Wood, I think, could stand to be more involved in the offense if he ends up being the primary backup center. So, like, I don't see the clear path to, like, Jalen has looked his best with the ball in his hands, but are you going to tell a team with title aspirations, like, hey, let's give the ball to this second-year guy? Like, obviously, if he gets to a certain level offensively and he's legitimately a fourth or fifth or sixth option, of course, you're going to run more of the offense through him. But I think there's a lot of steps to get to that point, and that's really where I see his primary value. I think he looked better defensively in the G League than he did at the NBA level. But again, I don't know how much of that will translate. And just from a disposition standpoint, he looks like a totally different player in the G League. And I thought at the NBA level started to second guess things. Also, one kind of running joke internally was that he was just gunning when he was out there in blowout situations. He was just looking to shoot. And I think he sometimes kind of plays with blinders on and needs to address that. I think did a better job at the G League level. But my fear is, like, if his best skill is running pick and roll and like hitting pull-up jumpers or step back jumpers, it kind of gives me some like Talen Horton-Tucker vibes a little bit, where like that's a good skill and it can be flashy at times, but I don't know if you're ever going to be high enough in the pecking order for it to really matter. And I would even say with THT, like, he was obviously showing flashes and at a higher level than JHS was at this point. We'll see. I'm like cautiously optimistic that some of the G League stuff could translate to Summer League, and then that translate to him having some more confidence in the preseason, and maybe he could grow into becoming a backup guard, maybe like the fifth guard on this team potentially. Like that to me, if he could be the fifth guard on the team next year, like that's a win, right? So you're behind theoretically Austin, D'Lo, Gabe, maybe Spencer or Max, and then like if Jalen is the fifth guy there, I think that's a win for the Lakers, because right now, again, he does not look like a rotation player at all on an NBA floor. And really, I'm not sure. Like, it's a significant jump he's going to have to take. And I'm not saying it's not possible, but it was a bit concerning. But if you're looking for some optimism, look at the G League and look at his shot making, look at his passing, and look at his composure as a lead guard. And then that's where I think you could start to see some of the skills that he theoretically has, but I've yet to translate to the NBA level. A couple more here at GA Noble 8. Hey, if the Lakers lose D'Lo and have to include Austin in a trade for a star shooting guard, do you think Gabe and signing CP3 on a minimum would work at point guard? So it really depends who we're talking about here. Like, are we talking about Donovan Mitchell or are we talking about Zach LaVine, right? And I think there's a big gap between those two types of players, right? Like, both are star shooting guards, but Donovan Mitchell is like all-star, all-NBA, third-team caliber, like top 25 at worst, but likely top 20 guy. Zach LaVine is more like a top 50-ish guy, or is it a DeJounte Murray? And he's, more of a top 40 to 45 guy, somewhere in that mix. So, like, it really just depends on what type of shooting guard you're adding. Like, if it's a Donovan Mitchell, you can get by with a Gabe Vincent, Chris Paul backcourt. You'll also still have Jalen Hood-Schifino, unless he's included in the trade, which he might be, but maybe not after his rookie season. So it really, it's just kind of depends on the makeup of the roster. I don't love a Gabe Vincent, Chris Paul 1-2 punch at point guard, but if you have Donovan Mitchell, LeBron, AD, Rui or Vando, Max, and you added another big, you added another wing, like, I can start to see the outlines of a team I like a little bit more. But if you're going that small at point guard, you need size at the other four positions. And already going with Donovan at shooting guard is not, he's not a big shooting guard. Even DeJounte or Zach LaVine, those are more like averaged size shooting guards. So you really need to blast length and athleticism and defense with the other four positions. So I don't love it. I think it could get by under the right circumstances, depending on what other moves the Lakers make, what other guys they bring in. And there are some teams that kind of punt on the point guard position. Like, the Lakers kind of did that the championship season, like, on paper, and like Alex Caruso, Rajon Rondo, like, those guys were role players. They were solid role players, and they did their jobs. And of course, LeBron was technically the point guard on that team. So, like, maybe that's not the best example, but the Lakers and other teams have been able to kind of punt on it and get by with like role players. And if you have a 3-and-D guy like Gabe Vincent and a wily veteran like Chris Paul backing him up, I think it's fine. But you also might have situations where you go LeBron at point guard. And so, like, I don't dislike it. I'm starting to talk myself a little bit more into it. But again, I think if you are going with that and you're sort of punting on the position, Gabe and Chris are both ideally backup point guards. So if you're going with those two as your two nominal point guards, I think, again, you really got to blast the other four positions with size and athleticism and defense to make up for some of the lack of production you're going to be getting at point guard. Next question at Bummy and Anderson. What about DeMarcus Cousins as an option for a big? He could play the 5, has a big frame, and can stretch the floor if needed. I keep seeing the references and the questions about DeMarcus Cousins and Dwight Howard. Here is my reality check for both guys as options. Neither guy has played in the NBA for 2 years. And once you are a big man in your 30s, I mean, once you're an NBA player in your 30s and really a role player, because if we're talking about Dwight Howard and DeMarcus Cousins in their current states, they would be role players, backup role players playing 8 to 12 minutes a night in like at most, right? But with those types of guys, taking 2 years off is a significant gap. And I know both guys have played internationally and kind of found ways to like stay in shape, but it is a big deal when you're at that stage. Like, Dwight is now in his late 30s. DeMarcus has had several significant injuries that have sapped his athleticism and made him even slower and less mobile than he initially was. And my other thing with DeMarcus is they basically have DeMarcus Cousins in Christian Wood. And from a frame perspective, of course, Boogie is bigger and stronger than Christian Wood, but a stretch 5 who is suspect defensively, I think Christian is a better rebounder than DeMarcus Cousins would be at this stage, or at least it's close. And I think Christian's certainly better defensively and should be better as a shooter, though he had a poor shooting season last year with the Lakers. So I think if Christian Wood had not opted in, I still wouldn't have loved the DeMarcus Cousins option, but you could at least like pitch it to me. But with Christian Wood on the roster, I think it would be too much overlap and not like I just think we saw even with the Warriors when he was averaging 16 and 8, DeMarcus Cousins was such a defensive liability that he essentially got played off the floor at certain points. And I remember I was covering the Clippers at that point, and talking to people with the Clippers, it was like the game plan is let's draw out Boogie and pick and rolls and let's attack his feet, let's attack him. And to have now suffered multiple lower extremity injuries, he's worked out for teams before. Like if DeMarcus Cousins was good enough to be back in the NBA, he would be back in the NBA. If Dwight Howard was good enough to be back in the NBA, he'd be back in the NBA. And of course, both guys have had some off-court stuff, and both guys have not had the best reputation as like locker room guys. But even that aside, just in terms of raw basketball ability, I think it's tough to take a 2-year gap and then expect to come back. There's just a level of conditioning and reps and all that stuff that you kind of lose being out of the league that long, especially once you're into your early to late 30s, as both guys are. So I get the theory. Like I think in theory it makes sense, DeMarcus Cousins, Dwight Howard. But I think the ship has sailed with both guys. I don't think either guy will be on a roster next year. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. And you could throw it back in my face. But I don't think either guy is an NBA player anymore. And finally, last question from the FFF198 on YouTube. This was the only YouTube question. So again, be sure to drop your questions in the comments and I will answer them in the next mailbag. Hi, Jovan. Just saw that you're doing another mailbag soon, so I wanted to ask the following question. What are you hearing on the Max Christie front? Is it likely that we keep him? If so, at what amount? Yes, it is likely that the Lakers keep Max Christie, partly because that's just how restricted free agency works, where the incumbent team has the advantage, and it is rare that rival teams will come in and offer a player a legitimate contract for fear of tying up their money and for fear that it's just going to be matched and you wasted that time when you could have been pursuing other free agents. Now, Max, I think he'll have some interest from smart teams. If I was a smart rival front office, I'd be trying to get Max as a cheap 3-and-D wing. But from what I've been told, the Lakers have interest in him. They want to retain him, and they still see the potential in him. That was, I think, part of the disconnect in terms of the front office and the coaching staff, in terms of Max Christie's role and him being underutilized. So from my understanding, the Lakers are going to try to retain him. Now, as for what that deal would look like, based on the Lakers' track record, it would probably be a 3-year deal, maybe 4, given his youth, but at least 3. I would probably lean 3. And then something in like the $15 to $20 million range. So something like $5 to $7 million annually. I could see 6 to 8, and that would be something like 3 years, $18 million, upwards of 3 years, $24 million. It really depends on if he can get a potential suitor to drive up the price a little bit and say, hey, like this team's interested in offering me 3 years, 21. Can you match it or surpass it? And then it's on the Lakers to just avoid the restricted free agency dance and do solid by him and just sign him to that contract or something even more. So I think Max will be back next year, barring a team swooping in and offering him something that makes the Lakers' jaw drop to the floor. I don't see that happening. Again, I think there'll be some interest, but I think the Lakers will be able to keep him at somewhere in like the $5 to $8 million range annually. But I think Max will have some leverage as a 21-year-old 3-and-D wing hitting the free agent market, even if it is as a restricted free agent. But that'll do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Again, if you want me to answer a question in a future mailbag, drop it in the comment section below and I will answer it in my next mailbag. For those on YouTube, please be sure to subscribe, hit that notification bell, drop a comment, and like this video. And for those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back on Monday with episode 22 of Buha's Block. I will talk to you then.